How about that? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Press Pros Huddle. I'm Bruce Hooley. That smiling face you see beside me is that of Lyle Sonny Folks, the founder and publisher of Press Pros Magazine. We're excited because we're halfway through the high school football playoffs, and we have 3 more weeks to go. So we're looking forward to talking about that tonight with you. With 6 games that are in our PressProsMagazine.com, visit Canton.com, Spotlight Visit Canton.com does serve the role of presenting sponsor of the Press Pros Huddle. Get to visit Canton.com, find out all the accommodations, lodging, restaurants that you need to know about for State Football Championship weekend at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium, December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Just 3 weeks away. Get those hotel rooms. Click on the banner ads that you see in PressProsMagazine.com content to get in connection with our friends at visitcanton.com. Good evening, Mr. Folks, and shout out to our own Brian Bayless for putting that awesome open together. Great job, Mr. Bayless.
I kind of felt like I was on the Mike Douglas show there for a minute.
Oh, exactly. You just wish you had the set from the Mike Douglas show that Kramer has in his garage on Seinfeld.
I do. Good week and a big week. Last week, of course, in high school sports. And as we saw together at the Nutter Center at Wright State University, congratulations locally here to the New Knoxville Rangers, winning their first title in volleyball, but overall, or moreover, I should say, the first women's team title in the history of New Knoxville High School. So congratulations to Meg Lageman and her staff and her girls for going home with the big trophy there. It was exciting to see, and I might say they earned it because they beat a couple pretty good teams in the semifinals and the finals, particularly with St. Henry to earn the right and beat them 3-1. Interesting because they're both in the same conference. They're both MAC members. So there was a little rival instinct going on there as well. But I think the thing, and I mean this sincerely, that it impressed me the most, a lot of people know the backstory at this point of Meg Lageman's husband, Ryan, dying tragically a couple of weeks ago in a car accident. And I was just really impressed and heartened by the fact that the people from that St. Henry rose in unison with the New Knoxville people at the end of the match to pay tribute not only to both teams, but in particularly to what the New Knoxville girls had achieved, because a lot of mental stress, a lot of emotional heartache there to play through over that period of 10 days. And to put that aside and go out and compete and play your best when you need to play your best and to earn what they did was magnificent.
It really was.
It was a victory not only for them on the volleyball court, but it was a victory for the human spirit. And I congratulate them heartily and could say I couldn't have been more impressed, with what I watched, what I saw.
Concur totally. They have a dynamic player in Carson Henson, and she really, I thought, lifted her team after St. Henry won the first game in that match. And, those girls have really dedicated themselves, from talking to some people at New Knoxville, have really dedicated themselves for a long time to winning a state championship. They had it in their sights all year. The one just unspeakably tragic thing that happens that no one can predict, but life happens sometimes very unpredictably, very unfairly. And to find a way to maintain their focus and to do what you do when something bad happens. You breathe in and breathe out. You put one foot in front of the other, and you press on. And that's what they did. And I too share your admiration for the St. Henry faithful and for the MAC chant that went up in the Nutter Center, because there is a lot of pride in the MAC. The MAC, we've had interactions with people here on the show who wonder why we extol the MAC and its winning tradition. And then when they go to the MAC website and they find out how deep and robust the MAC winning tradition is, they understand it. So that really reflected well on the MAC community, not just Saturday morning, but the way that they reached out, responded, and loved on the New Knoxville community through that entire challenge was really the true spirit of what high school athletics is about. A real true tribute to community.
I want to add this too. You mentioned Carson Henson a moment ago, who is a fantastic high school volleyball player, going next year to play at Duquesne University, a Division I school in Pittsburgh. and a member of the A-10 conference. I couldn't be more impressed with her ability to lead. Mm-hmm. And I know if you talk to her about that, or if you ask somebody on the team, they talk team. They say, as teams are taught to do, kids are taught to do, the sum is always greater than the individual parts. But that doesn't detract from the fact of leadership. And that young lady, whether it's popular to say it in this day and age or not, that young lady showed incredible leadership over that weekend. And, you can say all you want to about team, but every good team that I've ever been on or been around or watched has had a dynamic leader, somebody who goes out and not a rah-rah person or not a talker, but a doer. And, follow my lead. And she really did that with, I think she had 19 kills in one game and 30 in another. And in the semifinals, she had 30. And look, you can't take 30 kills out of a state finals semifinal game and expect to have the same kind of outcome that you do with them. And that's all you need to say is a person like that says, hey, get on my back and follow my lead, and we're going to come through this thing just fine. It's not that easy. It's not that appreciated anymore. But some of us from our generation still appreciate the fact that you got to have that in sports. You got to have that person that goes out there and fearlessly performs up to their skill level, their capability. And she did that. And it was impressive to watch.
It was. And then on the other side of the coin, we don't always cover the team that wins. Sometimes our team does not win. And Olentangy Liberty rolled into the finals in Division I, 26-1, and had every reason to expect that they would be experiencing the same kind of joyous celebration that New Knoxville did. And Liberty, for whatever reason, they just didn't have it that day, or Magnificat out of Rocky River, Ohio was just a little bit better. It is hard to beat a team 3 times, but they did it. And so Magnificat is the state champion in Division I, and that does not detract from the fact that Olentangy had a great year. They did, but I know they're very disappointed, as any team would be, to get that close and not win. And we have a bunch of teams now, Sonny, that remain in the hunt for a football state championship. We'll turn our attention to those with our 2 Division I games that we will cover Friday night in Central Ohio. Upper Arlington wins the Battle of the BMWs, I dubbed it, between Upper Arlington and New Albany, 2 undefeated teams last week. UA just continues to impress, and they really gave it to a very good New Albany team. Congratulations to Bubba Kidwell and his New Albany Eagles. They've had a tremendous year at New Albany in all sports. But UA was the better team that night at Olentangy Liberty High School. Simon Monin threw 5 touchdown passes. Sam Cannon, UA's offense took a leap when Sam Cannon joined them in week 3. They still have Carson Graysock, their running back, who's the first and foremost thing you have to stop when you play UA. Their defense is underrated. So UA gets its shot at the 5-time defending regional champion Pick Central Tigers. The Tigers are loaded with Division I talent. Tyler Gillison, CJ Doggett, both going to University of Cincinnati to play for Luke Fickle. Sonny Stiles just committed. He's not a senior yet, but he committed to play for Ohio State. He's the son of Lorenzo Stiles, who I covered at Ohio State in the early 1990s. So Pick Central is loaded. They had suffered 1 loss. They avenged that to Pick North. So that's one, region final. Pick Central and Upper Arlington. They'll play that at Westerville Central, our other Division I game. Marysville, Gabe Powers, Colton Powers, his brother, got a 96-yard touchdown run last week. Marysville has pounded, and I mean pounded, everybody but Hilliard Darby. This week they will play at Hilliard Darby, but they are not playing Darby. They are playing Springfield. And Springfield, the Wildcats have been very impressive so far too. They really throw it around. So that'll be a great football game on Friday night.
It's interesting. We have a number of questions that I printed off this afternoon from people who write into the website. And one of them happens to be, and no better time to talk about this since you brought it up, from Mark from Upper Arlington, who wrote in and said, enjoy your guys' coverage, but given the record, do you think Upper Arlington is the most underrated team? in the state. It doesn't seem like they get that much attention. Enjoy the Press Pros coverage. Um, I'll let you lead with that because in response to Mark's question, because I actually went online this afternoon and you don't see very much about the Golden Bears written, much publicity, in fact, at all about them, given the fact that they're 13-0, they're impressive, they're in a regional final. Your take, if any, on that?
Well, I think the thing with UA that you typically see in Division One is you're going to see who's the D1 star, who's the Division One college star
Yeah,
on that team.
that's true.
With Marysville, it's obviously Gabe Powers. If had been in Division Two, let's say it had been Westerville South, you'd say it's Caden Saunders. He's going to Penn
Penn
State as a
State.
wide receiver. If you look at the team out of Medina, the Bees are ranked number 1 in Northeast Ohio, and they've got Drew Aller at quarterback. He's going to Penn State. Ohio State would like to get him. So when you look at Upper Arlington, I don't think there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that are going after Carson Graysock. That kid is a phenomenal football player. Simon Monin is a tremendous quarterback. Is he a Division I quarterback? I mean, I don't think he's committed anywhere right now. They just have a lot of nice players, and they're very well coached by Justin Buttermore. And they're very good, very underrated. Where they're underrated is on defense. I don't think anybody underrates their offense. And I can't really say that they're quote-unquote underrated because I think they were 4th in the final poll in the state of Ohio, and that's pretty high when you consider that the royalty in Division I, your St. Ed's, your St. X, your St. Ignatius, your Menor, your Medina, there's just this perception out there that Southern Ohio and Northeast Ohio play the best high school football. And when Brian White at Hilliard-Davidson was winning state championships and he beat Cleveland Glenville in a state championship, that shocked everybody's sensibilities that a team out of Central Ohio could win the state championship in Division I. So I think there's some validity to your question in that Central Ohio teams aren't looked at the same way those Cincinnati teams and those Cleveland teams are. But Ignatius is out and St. X is out and UA continues to play. So they're very good, and they're now within 3 wins of a state title.
Well, he wrote on here so underrated, but I think what he meant, and I think he said in this later on, don't get much attention. I think what he means is underpublicized.
I agree with that.
Over the fact of underrated, because I did look it up and I saw where they were rated at number 4. And I think there's another thing, too, that plays against people's recognition of what Upper Arlington has accomplished this year. And that's just they're out of the habit of being in this position. If you go back 3 or 4 decades when Upper Arlington was an event on Friday Night Football in Columbus, it's not exactly been that way for a while. They had a good basketball team 3 or 4 years ago, and in fact, I think made the state finals in Division I at the Schottenstein Center. But it has been a while between drinks of water for the Upper Arlington football program. And so, what goes around comes around. We always talk about the cycle of athletes. They've certainly got some players there now, as you mentioned, with Graysock and Simon Monin. And Buttermore's done a great job there. And you just don't move in and flip a light switch and turn and suddenly illuminate the room. Not in football and not in especially in a conference like the OCC with 32 teams and as much talent spread around among all those communities. So, Mark, to answer your question, I think Bruce makes a very, very good point that, when you consider Cleveland and you consider Cincinnati, it's been a long time since anybody from Columbus caught the attention or captivated the attention, because even Pickerington, for their success. When was the last time Pickerington won a state championship? How many state championships?
Yeah, they won one a couple years ago. They beat Menor in the state championship game, but those 2 kids who were big stars on that team are now playing at Michigan State. So I would say it's within the last 5 years. But let me add one more thing to that too, Sonny, and to the point of the question about being under-recognized. We're in a different media era now, and this is going to sound like I'm saying this because I'm tooting Press Pro's horn, and to a certain extent I am, but you used to be able to go online and you could read about St. X, you could read about St. Ignatius, you could read about Elder, you could read about Princeton. You can't do that anymore in the era of media paywalls except on Press Pros. We are the one site that details coverage of the teams that we cover in Central Ohio, in the MAC, in the MVL, in the Shelby County League. We don't make you pay for that content. That is free content. It's why we're read in all 88 counties. It's why we're growing. And I would love to go on and read about some of the teams that, for instance, I'd love to scout Winton Woods, the team Piqua plays on Friday night. You can't get past the Enquirer paywall. You can't get past the Plain Dealer paywall. You can't get past the Columbus Dispatch paywall. And there's not enough utility in me being a member of all of those sites for me to be a member of those sites all year round. So that's part of the problem, is that every kid in the state of Ohio, except the Gabe Powerses, except the Drew Allers, except the Caden Saunders, the guys who are big-time Big Ten or above recruits, they're all going to be under-recognized because you just don't have access to that information anywhere anymore except PressProsMagazine.com.
Yeah, and it does chase a lot of people off. It's discouraging to go in and because, first of all, you have to trust the process. That if you log on there and you give them your paying information, you don't know where that's going, and into whose hands that falls anymore. So that's a flawed system to begin with in the minds of a lot of people, particularly of our generation. Mm-hmm. Maybe the younger people aren't as cynical or don't suspect it like the older generation does. But you make a very good point. It's not that easy anymore to read about high school football players or high school athletes throughout the state of Ohio. So, Mark, we appreciate your question about Upper Arlington. We're impressed with him this year. I think we've seen him now this weekend. We'll make what, 5 times?
5 times, I think, yeah.
So best of luck to Coach Buttermore and Greasock and Simon Monin and company, and we'll be there. It's one of our coverage games on Friday night.
Yeah, Kuiper Lashutka and Sam Cannon and a lot of good players on that football team. Justin on Twitter, he's a faithful – I'm sorry, not Twitter, Facebook. He's a faithful Facebook messenger. He says, MAC football will have one team in the Final Four for the 28th straight year, 1993 to 2021. And Justin can say that without fear of contradiction, as my friend Jeff Rimmer of the Columbus Blue Jackets says, because Marion Local plays St. Henry in Division 7, Region 28. Bob Winning, he's got your 3 MAC teams left right there, Versailles, Coldwater, and Marion Local. And before we focus on those, Sonny, let's shout out the Anna Rockets because they got to the Final 4 in their region. 6-6 football team. Really good year for Anna, playing well in the postseason.
Yeah, and I thought Nick Marino did a really good job. We saw them I saw them about 5 weeks ago when they played New Bremen, and I looked at the time, and they didn't play very well that night. But I thought to myself at the time, well, I'm looking at New Bremen 2 or 3 years ago when I'm looking at Anna, because there's obviously talent there. They've obviously got kids there that are in the developmental stage, the same as the Bart Bixlers and the Riley Hills camps and that great group that Nick had there in 2019 when they won the Division 6 title. So, yes, I agree. Shout out to Anna for the season they had this year. They had some success. They opened some eyes. I think they took a huge step in taking the next step in terms of MAC competitive balance in the MAC next year. And, it's really exciting. When you consider the success of that conference over the years, and for the last decade, primarily, it has been Coldwater and Marion Local. But now you have to consider New Bremen. You got to consider the reemergence of Versailles. Certainly St. Henry this year. We got somebody who wrote to us here in a moment. We'll talk about the St. Henry Redskins this year. 6-time state champions, 4 with Coach Beckman and 2 with Jeff Starkey. They're right back in the thick of the things in the regional finals this weekend as well, playing Marion Local. So, I think you make a very good point about Anna. You add them next year. Now you got 6 legitimate teams next year that are going to be knocking heads in that league, and they're going to make it all the more tougher, to predict who's going to win on a given Friday night and who's going to come out of there and who's going to challenge for a state title.
Let's turn our attention for a bit to the Piqua Indians. They will play Winton Woods. Piqua is, of course, 12-0. Winton Woods 10-3. They'll play at Northmont High School on Friday night. I got my first look at the Indians last week. Extremely impressed. You're going to think I'm going to say Josiah Medley because he had 3 touchdowns, and that's self-evident. But with one quality that great teams have that is so hard to define and so hard to develop, and that is the ability to find a way. If you're watching that Piqua game against Edgewood in the middle of the second quarter, and Edgewood is just turning out yards 5, 6, 8, 7, 6, 4, 5 at a time, you're just thinking to yourself, how is this going to turn in favor of Piqua? And I would have thought even into the early fourth quarter that Edgewood was going to win that football game, but Piqua found a way, made every play they needed to make in the last 8 minutes. An unbelievable punt, a 70-yard punt, and it was legit. Boomed over the kid's head, and then one big bounce. A great defensive play by their outstanding linebacker. Remind me, Sonny, his name's Schmeezing. What's his first name?
Sam Schmeezing.
Sam Schmeezing. And then just a tremendous job forcing that fumble, getting that fumble recovered, taking it into the end zone, winning that football game. And I got to tell you guys a little story here. So I'm outside the Piqua locker room after the game. And, I talk about leadership all the time and great leadership. And here's a tell on leadership. I'm under the stands with Bill Neese and with Jeff Gilbert, Dayton Daily News. Shout out to Jeff. He's a good man. He's a professor at Cedarville. It's raining. Bill Neese comes over. We're speaking under the stands. And I counted 5 different Piqua Indians done showering, dressed, ready to head to the bus, ready to head to mom and dad, ready to get something to eat, walked 30 yards out of their way to come over and hug Bill Neese, slap Bill Neese on the back, give Bill Neese a high five. That's a football team that loves its football coach. And they love their football coach because they know he loves them and he sacrifices for them. And you are so fortunate, parents, if you have a coach, and we have a lot of them, who invest in kids' lives like that and make a difference like that. The bond between the Versailles Tigers and Ryan Jones, between the Marion Local Flyers and Tim Goodwin, I could go on and on and on, Chip Otten and Coldwater. That is so special. That is not automatic. And I just love seeing that out of Bill Neese and the Piqua Indians.
No, and that imprint lasts for life. This is why we talk about, and we write about this on the site, the importance of playing interscholastic sports in high school, because you talk about leadership. You can't get that in a bottle. You can't shampoo it. It's not something you can just, it's not body wash. You learn that from people like the men that you just mentioned. And I'll say another thing about Piqua. They never, ever, I've watched them for decades. They never quit. I can remember some times when they have been prohibitively down in football games, and they play hard until they start the bus, and they don't start the bus until the clock strikes 0. So that's one thing. And another thing is that Bill always Bill prepares for everything. And 2 weeks ago, when they were struggling to get things going in the first half against Withrow.
Yeah.
He pulls out the fake punt. They need a first down. I think it's in the second quarter. They're looking at like 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7 or something like that. He pulls the fake punt. Kid runs 30 yards, flips the momentum of the game. They go down, score. They were behind at halftime, but that was a big statement that he made to his team saying, hey, we work on this all year long. I trust that we're going to be successful with this. And the kids believe that when a coach is that prepared and has that kind of insight and I asked Bill afterwards, I said, did you see that on film? Did you see something that made you believe that would be successful? And he didn't answer the question, of course, because, football coaches are strange that way. They always feel like they're giving up state secrets if they answer a question like that. Basketball, baseball coaches can't talk enough about, how they do things. But football coaches are a little bit different. But again, kids understand. They admire that. They respect that. They appreciate how hard their coach works to be prepared and to put them in a position of success. And you said it. Tim Goodwin does it. Chip Otten does it. Yep. Bill Neese does it.
Ryan
Steve
Jones
Nolan's done it for years. Ryan Jones does it. They all do it.
Yeah.
And
kids does it. Yep.
Yeah, kids are not dumb. They know that they're out there and their coach has got their back and putting them in a position to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely so. All right, hit us again with another Reader Speaks question, or we'll check a couple face.
All right. Got one here from Joe. I think this is Joe Smith from Pickaway County, who writes all the time to the Reader Speaks.
There we go.
And it says, now that we're in the regional finals with the teams that most people thought would be here, what's the problem with the extra game and the extra teams getting the opportunity to at least play? I don't see any, Joe says, I don't see any problem with expanding the regions. I think it gives the kids more of an opportunity. I know you guys talk against it, but Bruce, I'll let you have the first whack at his question.
Well, it has worked out that the best teams have advanced in our area, but when you look at Division II, for instance, Piqua is the only number one seed left. Now, there are some legacy programs. We talked about those D1 legacy programs. In D2, Akron Hoban is left, Walsh Jesuit is left, but Benedictine got beat on Friday night. And so there's one number one seed left in Division II, and that's the Piqua Indians. So is that a result of 16 teams in a region instead of 8? Those number one seeds having to play another week? I don't know. Did they have players injured? I don't know. And I don't mind seeing some teams like Piqua's going to play Winton Woods. They're a 7. Versailles is a 5. I said from the very beginning, I got to see 4 better teams in the region in Versailles. I got to see 3 better teams in the region in Coldwater. Like Coldwater's a 4. Come on, man. So I don't know, but I just think that the regular season should earn you something. And I don't like to see winless or 1-win teams in the playoff.
Joe, I did a little math, and my friend Chris Cron up in Coldwater helped me with this week. I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. There were 49 shutouts in round one. 49 shutouts in round one of the playoffs.
Yeah, and who knows how many running clocks?
And they're all running clocks. Yes. How many running clocks? That's just shutouts. And he also had another statistics of the number of games that were determined by 30 points or more, and that was above 40, I think. Yeah. And there was 20 or more that were determined by 40 points or more. That's the one thing that I can point to as to why I'm not particularly enamored about having 16 teams in the regions. The other thing I'm going to point to is I have yet to been to a high school football to a playoff game that has been a sellout. The games that I have been to have been miserably attended. Now, I will say this at Piqua the other night, and Piqua says it's a great football town, and it has been for years. But Piqua Stadium seats about 8,000 or 9,000. And on Piqua's side of the field the other night when they played Withrow, when I was there in the second round game, it was about half to 2/3 full. Withrow might have brought 150 people. I don't know what that says about the playoffs, because I do remember in 2006 when the Indians won the Division II state championship, when they played those games at Alexander Stadium that year. It was really hard to get a ticket. I mean, they sold a lot of seats. I mean, they packed them in there. The Troy Piqua game for years now has really struggled to attract people. Now, I don't know if it's the culture. I don't know whether it's the ticket prices, because I hear people every weekend complain about the price of going to a high school football game, even a playoff game now. I don't know if it's the fact of the OHSAA. I don't know if it's the fact of this electronic ticket business keeping people away, because you can't go to the box office anymore and just plank down $10 and buy a ticket and walk in. They don't want your money. You're not going to go to a game if you don't go online and put your Visa card in and risk somebody stealing your identity to buy a ticket that way. And yet the OHSAA says this is how we're going to do business. Yeah. It's how Ohio State says this is how we're going to do business. You know, I had a parking. We went to the you and I covered the Ohio State basketball game last night. When I get there, I show them my phone that has my parking pass on it, and it wouldn't read last night. Now here it is. The scanner would not read the icon on my phone, and the guy worked at it and worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. And he finally said, "Go ahead." He said, "Obviously, it's in there. I don't know why this isn't working." Well, a lot of people don't have patience for that. or they are cynical about that kind of process. There's a number of reasons why, Joe. I think that it was better in the old days when you had 8 teams. And there's another thing. There's a lot of people who would like this thing concluded this weekend or next. Yeah. They don't want to see this thing go into the first week of December. They'd like to have football season concluded by Thanksgiving, give kids a couple of weeks to rest, kids that play basketball to kind of let their body shift gears from the muscle groups necessary from football to play basketball. There's any number of reasons why you can support the fact of it was a better process when there were 8 games. Less is more. And I think a lot of people this year, and it may take a while, I don't know, for them to get the idea that less is not more, that this is going to be just fine with 16 teams. And then, of course, there's the people that are out there bashing the Ohio High School Athletic Association for this being a money grab. We're doing this to make more games, more tickets, more revenue. And as I just told you a minute ago, I haven't seen it this year. I haven't seen overwhelming crowds that would lead you to believe they're making more money on this thing.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen it either. So we'll see what crowds are like this weekend. All right, let's bury the number 1 game on Saturday night till the end. Coldwater and Allen East will lead off with that one. Coldwater Cavs, wow, they have been impressive. Mechanicsburg was the top seed in the region. And I don't know if Kurt Forrest knew what was coming, but what he got last year, he got again. Even though Miles Blasingame and a lot of those state champion Coldwater Cavs were gone, Coldwater's still pretty good. And Mechanicsburg learned it the hard way.
The thing that strikes me about Coldwater is they have so many ways that they can beat you. I mean, they have a good running game, but their kids are playing with so much energy right now. Whether it's the pass, whether it's the run, whether it's special teams, whatever it is. I said this to Chip the other night. I was impressed by how much energy and enthusiasm. And he said, our kids really like each other. That's the first thing out of his mouth. Our kids really like each other as a team. And he says that helps. Secondly, we're healthy. I think he mentioned having one of his defensive players back this week. If he's back, they're fully healthy for the first time in weeks. So they're peaking at the right time. They're extremely confident. Again, it goes back to the point that you made a few minutes ago about confidence in your head coach and appreciation for them putting them in a position of success. And listen, Mechanicsburg is a hard-hitting, physical football team. And obviously they rest on their running game, and they believe that Jake Hurst and that quarterback Conley that they have are going to get them yards in big chunks, and they simply could not do it the other night. I think I wrote in the game story, he must have felt like somebody was sticking him with voodoo doll pins or something, because when you play Coldwater, there's an awful lot to overcome. You have to have a more complete game, I think, than what Mechanicsburg showed. Somebody wrote to us and said it was a bad seed to begin with. Well, it may be a bad seed, but again, whose decision's that? I mean, that process there, when you've got 16 teams in a region, it's that much harder to tell who is a legitimate seed and who's not.
Yeah. So they will take on Allen East. That game will be played at Trotwood on Saturday night. Versailles is,
that's not Coldwater.
That game will be played at Sydney. Coldwater's 11-2. Allen East is 10-3. Now let's move to Versailles and Preble Shawnee, Division 5. Versailles, really a rock'em game with the team from Cincinnati that I can't place now. Why? 14-0 is the final. Cincinnati Taft. Thank you. Taft was the top seed, and Taft just lines up and runs it. They don't throw it, but Versailles was equal to that task and equal to Taft, a little bit more superior to Taft on the line of scrimmage. Taranteo had a big game for Versailles. Ryan Kanapke had a big game for Versailles on the defensive line. They got a stop at the goal line in late first quarter. Carson Bay, 3 touchdowns for Versailles, or 2 touchdowns for Versailles, rather. And he played a nice game at linebacker, too. 12-1 Versailles, 13-0 Preble Shawnee. And that game will be played at Trotwood on Saturday night.
Well, Preble Shawnee is a team that has a reputation for years of being a physical team. I predicted this year that they would probably upset Arcanum's apple cart when they played them, teams like them and Tri-Village, because they're going to come in there and they're going to physically challenge more of the finesse teams like what Arcanum was this year. But they're not going to physically challenge Versailles because Versailles, as you say, are very impressive in their interior lines. Their running game is deep with Osborne and Landon Henry, Carson Bay. They've got kids that can run, the McEldownys that can run out there and catch the ball, extend the field, and then of course their defense. They are a team that hits, so they're not going to be intimidated by a team with a reputation by being physical like what Preble Shawnee is. You have the other thing is that look, the elephant in the room is strength of schedule. 12-1 in the MAC. Compared to 13-0 in the Western Ohio Athletic Conference, playing against teams like
Bradford, Twin
National
Valley
Trail,
South,
Mississinawa, Twin Valley South,
yeah.
Tri-County North, and teams like that. You that doesn't equate. It just doesn't. That's no disrespect, but it's not the same as a steady diet of St. Henry, Marion Local, New Bremen, and teams like that on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, it is not. So we'll see. Versailles is a 5. Preble Shawnee is a 2. And we'll see how that one comes out. But we'll have it for you on Press Pros on Saturday night, late, somewhere around midnight. And now the headline game, the one that will guarantee the MAC, a team in the Final Four for the 28th straight year. Marion Local, the team everybody would have thought would have been there. And they are there, 13-0. They've persevered through injuries. They coasted to victory over Riverside. They will play at Wapakoneta. They will play St. Henry, and St. Henry's 10-3. St. Henry had a surprisingly easy win over Tri-Village. I did not think that Tri-Village was necessarily going to win that game, but I did not think Tri-Village would get shut out. That is quite a defensive performance by St. Henry to shut out Reed Ware and the Tri-Village Patriots.
The point we made a few moments ago when we talked about Upper Arlington, a lot of people are overlooking St. Henry and just how good they are because they are a little bit out of the habit. It's been since 2006 since they've won a state title, and since that time, the cycle has been down. They've had years when they had 40 kids dressed for games on Friday night. In the old days when Starkey and Beckman they were dressing 80 and 85. Well, now that cycle has come back. They've got the pedigree and the bloodlines again playing football now at St. Henry, and Owen Layfeld, their running back, is as good as any dynamic, as good a leader offensively as anybody I've seen this year. You give him the ball 20-25 times, and he's going to have a profound impact on most football games. And besides that, he's a very good player defensively as well. So that's a team that a lot of people have overlooked that haven't played them. They're out of the habit of respecting and having the expectations for St. Henry. But Brad Luthman's got a good football team this year, and it's like Tim said to me the other day. They seem to be peaking at just the right time when you can go out and hold them, a team like Tri-Village and a running back like Reed Ware, to literally nothing. Like they did the other night. Marion, on the other hand, has got that magnificent defense. They're tremendously coached. Nobody questions their ability against anybody on any given night. And I think this is the marquee game in small school football in Ohio this weekend on Saturday night. I would guess, just from our metrics over the last weekend, that we will have our coverage of that game. I would say we'll have somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200,000 readers just on that football game alone, from Northeast Ohio, from Lake and Cuyahoga counties, Trumbull counties up in that area, from Northwest Ohio, from Williams County and Wood County and up in there, Hancock and Putnam and up in there, people who are just interested to see. Because the elephant in the room is if Marion Local, their next title makes them the all-time leader in titles won by a football program. They're currently tied with St. Ignatius with 11. So that's on the table every year for Marion Local now until somebody, they beat the record or somebody ties them and passes them up. And Kirtland certainly right now in Division 5 is run. They've won 2 or 3 out of the last 3 or 4. So yeah, that game is a compelling game, and it's no gimme. That's going to be a hard. We don't predict this
Nope.
week. We stopped last week for the season because it gets to this point of the year where you get so many teams that you haven't seen. It's really hard to be relevant with and accurate in terms of getting the information out there. So anyway, it's
Well,
going to be a great game on Saturday night.
it is, and we started talking about St. Henry, Sonny, a few weeks ago, in the vein of could they be this year's New Bremen? When they got the 6th seed in Region 28, we said we watch out for them. They have the feel, the look of a team that could be this year's New Bremen. And they have, to their credit, have played to that. They've won 10 games. Now, they lost 3 games in the regular season, including 20-7 to Marion. And you and I saw them very early in the year. And I know some of the St. Henry people did not like it when I said that they played Fort Fry. And by the way, Fort Fry is in the regional finals in their region in Division 6. And I felt that day that St. Henry could have won that football game. I thought it was a very even football game. They were not outclassed at all at Fort Fry. And my question coming out of that game was, for a proud program like St. Henry that has a lot of titles in its background, do they need to win a tight, close game like that Fort Fry game to prove to themselves that they can do it? So that when you get in a tight game, you're not looking at the clock or you're not waiting for the other shoe to drop or something like that. And we never questioned their talent. We never questioned the fact that they could run the ball with Owen Layfeld. They have clearly found their groove. And they do remind me a lot of the New Bremen Cardinals last year under Chris Schmidt. We had the same question about New Bremen last year. Having never been there, would the stage be too big for them against a Warren JFK? Well, obviously not. They didn't have a running clock in that game. So
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to get on St. Henry and Marion Local. I don't recall, and you probably covered their game earlier this year, or we had Greg Billing there, but it was 20-7, and Marion Local has had some big injuries in the backfield. Were those players healthy at that point in time? Is St. Henry getting a less healthy Marion Local team this time around than they got the first time around?
Well, they're getting Drew Seitz didn't play in that game because he wasn't back at the time. And what they're getting right now is, they're down one running back in Kyle Oddie. Kyle Oddie is out for the year, but his brother, of course, is the quarterback and a very dynamic player. And the one thing you could say about Marion football, next man up is not cliche there. I mean, when they say next man up, they've got somebody poised to step in like a Dylan Fleck and score 3 touchdowns like he did last week. So the last time that I saw him play. So that's going to be a very evenly matched team. I know there's a lot of mutual respect between the two teams. Marion Local certainly knows that St. Henry is big enough, strong enough between the tackles, to command the line of scrimmage, run the ball. And, that's what you don't want to see happen to you when it gets to this time of year. You don't want to be dominated at the line of scrimmage. And that's what happened to Tip City the other night when they got mauled pretty good by Bellbrook. And that Bellbrook team is a really impressive team as well. So that game on Saturday night is no question a marquee game and one that I'm going to be very interested to see the outcome of.
For our college fans, for our Buckeye fans, they also have a marquee game on Saturday. They're taking on Michigan State. Michigan, of course, is next week. We are credentialed for the Michigan-Ohio State football game. So Sonny and Mark Snyder will be on the scene for that one. And on Saturday, Mark Snyder will be covering Michigan State and Ohio State in Ohio Stadium. So we have UD basketball covered with the Hall of Famer Hal McCoy. You can find on the site the story of Ohio State's win over Bowling Green. Not a lot in there about Bowling Green. There's a lot in there about Ohio State and how their team may be taking on a different complexion with Justice Sewing's injury up in the air. The Buckeyes play Thursday night at Xavier. That will be a raucous atmosphere at the Cintas Center. And then Ohio State hits a stretch where they will play Cal, Florida, Seton Hall, Duke. 2 of those first 3, and then Duke on November the 30th in Value City Arena, and we'll certainly be covering that one. But high school football is our focus right now. We're looking forward to the next 3 weeks. Regional finals are this weekend, and we are presented by visitcanton.com, our presenting sponsor for the Press Pros Huddle Show. Visit Canton.com banners you'll find in all the Press Pros content on the high school side. Free discounts to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is right there adjacent to Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium, site of the state championships. There's a game on Thursday night. There are 3 games on Friday. There are 3 games on Saturday. It's a phenomenal weekend. The championships belong in Stark County. We're thrilled to be covering it. We're thrilled to partner with visitcanton.com. Check out their site for all your lodging, dining, and entertainment options on state championship football weekend.
You got time for 2 more quick questions?
Of course.
Jody writes, I attended the state volleyball tournaments, appreciated them a lot, thought your coverage was good, but I thought the finals felt more like a district or regional finals. Your thoughts? Jody, the first thing I'm going to say is you have to appreciate the fact that the Ohio High School Athletic Association is working with about half the staff that they used to. That's one thing. The second thing is I know where you're coming from on this thing, and what was really missing is the personality of a Dan Ross or Jerry Snodgrass handing out the trophy. To have a scripted message that's addressed or read by the public address announcer does sound a little bit out of tradition with what it used to be like when you had those 2 men who knew those communities intimately, knew the shopkeepers, knew the barbershops, knew the grocery store, knew the watering holes, and able to go in there with a relationship with the athletic director, with the principal, with some of the teachers and the kids and the names and all that. That is kind of missing right now. But again, you have to appreciate the fact that the OHSAA is in, I think, a money-saving mode. They're operating with a lot less people. And there are some corners that weren't dressed up or windows that weren't dressed up this year, maybe the way that they have been in the past. But I do appreciate the question. I noticed it myself. And I think, those elements were missing this year. You were there. You got any comment about that?
Well, I bring a different perspective to it because it's my first state volleyball final, and I thought the venue was fine. I was actually impressed with the Nutter Center. You shared with me your thoughts about the Nutter Center before we went down there. I like arenas that are around retail and around dining. So I think the Nutter Center is in a good location. It's easy to get to. It's right off the highway. I thought it had a big arena atmosphere. The PA announcing was a little hard to understand. If you were out on the floor, I couldn't really understand the PA announcer. That's certainly not an OHSAA issue. That's a Wright State issue. And I would say that I give the OHSAA under Doug Ute very high marks for the venues that they've picked for their state championships. Mm-hmm. Last year was a very difficult year in all aspects. They really pulled it out of the fire. We don't give them enough credit for how adroitly, word of the day, kids, they pulled it out of the fire on the state football championships, moving from Fortress Obetz to Paul Brown Tiger Stadium in the span of 2 or 3 days. Now, that was not the OHSAA's doing. It was forced on them by Andrew Ginther, the mayor of Columbus, and the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine. The Ohio High School Athletic Association with Nate Moore, the head coach at Massillon, Washington, they did a phenomenal job. That was great. I love the basketball tournaments at UD Arena. I don't mind at all the volleyball at the Nutter Center. There might be those who would say, well, they ought to play the volleyball at Covelli Center on the Ohio State campus. Folks, nobody at the OHSAA will say this, but I get the clear vibe that it is just very difficult to work with Ohio State on venues. And that's Ohio State's right. Those are their buildings. They have their own sports teams. They have the surface. But I don't feel like Ohio State is prioritizing the importance of having Ohio high school championships on their campus the way they did under some previous athletic administrations and under some previous football coaches and maybe some of their other sports coaches as well. So I thought the volleyball was fine, and I give them high marks for their venues.
Well, I will say this about Wright State. I just appreciate the convenience.
Yes.
I really do, because when you consider what volleyball means in West Central Ohio, the MAC, Shelby County League, and how easy it is for those people to come down there, park, get in quickly, get out quickly on 675 and out to the interstate and home. And my only point about, and the PA now that the sound system has nothing to do with the OHSAA.
Nothing
But
at all.
I don't think you can overlook the fact that too they're operating with a diminished staff,
No
and
doubt.
and when you go back and you look at some of the great state tournaments, and I've said this for years, nobody when they were fully staffed and they were attracting 12, 15, 16, 18,000 people to the state basketball finals at the Shot, nobody was presenting a state tournament because I've been to them in Kentucky and Indiana. Nobody does that better than Ohio does and the OHSAA. And right now, they're just not in a position to do that. One final question. Given the unpredictable football, college football, how unpredictable it's been this year, do you think the Buckeyes have their best shot at winning it all this year? This comes from, I don't know about this name, Evan Williams in Hilliard.
Well, I have said before on my own podcast that I think, to be a team that beats Ohio State, you're going to have to be able to score in the high 20s or 30s against their defense. But they have the potential to put up a lot of points on anybody. I would be interested to watch them play Georgia. I think Ohio State and Alabama would be a score fest. I really believe that, I know this doesn't resonate much with our readers, I really believe Cincinnati is getting screwed big time on the playoff. And here's my only point I'll make on Cincinnati. Okay, I've watched them play. It's not that they're undefeated. It's how they play. They play like a Big Ten team. They play like a Big 8 team or a Big 12 team. They're not an SEC team, but they're a physical team. They have good corners. They can run the football. They can throw the football. And I would just ask you this. If Notre Dame were undefeated, where would Notre Dame be ranked in the college football playoff rankings?
Yeah.
Now, they'd be ahead of Ohio State. They'd be ahead of Oregon. And the reason Notre Dame is not undefeated is because Cincinnati beat them at Notre Dame. And they beat them handily. You look at the score, it's like a 10-point game. It was never that close. And so that's why I think Cincinnati deserves to be in. What you do with Oregon, Ohio State, the head-to-head win, I don't know. Whether Alabama deserves to be in, I don't know. But I know if you go through a season undefeated and you win at Notre Dame, you deserve to be in the college football playoff.
I think this about Cincinnati, and you're an old athlete. I'm an old athlete. There is this thing that's hard to get beyond. When you talk about their strength of schedule and people talk about, well, they're not winning with style points, it's awfully hard to avoid not playing down to the level of competition when you're playing Tulane, when you're playing an SMU, or when you're playing some of those teams in the American Conference that just really don't strike fear into the hearts of teams like Cincinnati or Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama if they were playing those. I can't help but think when I watched that game against Navy 2 weeks ago, Navy's not a great football team. They may play with a style that's hard to prepare against with a triple option. But when you're a team like Ohio State, which played them a few years ago in the opening game, and it took them a quarter to kind of get their feet under, and then they blew out Navy. The other week, Cincinnati just didn't. Again, they didn't win it with a lot of style points. You felt like after that game was over, they should have beaten Navy by 4 or 5 touchdowns, and they just didn't do that for whatever reason. So I think strength of schedule hurts them because, again, I think it's just human nature to occasionally play down to the level of competition that you think that doesn't belong in the same stadium with you.
Yeah, I just think strength of schedule is such a kind of a red herring because why is Michigan State good? Why is Michigan good? Well, because they're in the Big Ten. You presume that they're good. I think Cincinnati would beat both those teams. I can't prove it, but, Michigan was good, in the 90s? Michigan State was good occasionally. They've been in a bigger league longer. They've got some players in the NFL you've heard of, so you feel like they're really, really good. Doesn't mean anything for this year. And I look at Penn State. We all thought Penn State was a super team. Couldn't wait for Ohio State to play Penn State. Well, then they lose at Iowa. They lose at Illinois. They lose to Michigan. They're a 4-loss football team. So Penn State was in the top 10 of the college football playoff rankings. They're a 4-loss football team. So I just look at those Big Ten teams and I think, well, sure, they beat up on each other. Purdue was a 19th ranked team in America. I mean, are you kidding me? Purdue beat Iowa. Purdue beat Michigan State. Purdue's the 19th ranked team in the country. They look like, oatmeal against Ohio State.
Tulane.
So we rank them high because they're in the Big Ten, but The Big Ten doesn't have a good bowl record over the years outside, its top team or two. So I just think that it's very hard to go undefeated. I don't require you to beat teams by 4 or 5 touchdowns every week. I know Ohio State does that occasionally. But there was a week 2 weeks ago, Oklahoma won close, Ohio State won close, Alabama won close, Cincinnati won close. Was anybody talking about any of those 4 teams winning close except Cincinnati? No, they weren't. No. And that's where it's unfair.
It is what it is until there is no perfect system that I see coming, except the fact that inevitably they're going to expand that in the manner in which we have the high school tournament here, to the point where the traditional bowl games are not going to mean very much. And frankly, I think if you expand it too much to the point where how special are those games, those final 4 teams, that's going to lose its savor as well. I guarantee it. Every time you give people more than what they need or they anticipate, you're watering down the product and the anticipation and the excitement for the process. And that's my danger that I see coming for college football in the future.
Yep. We have some nice comments here as we wrap up the show. Keith says, outstanding show. Thanks from South Florida. Justin reminds us that girls basketball is opening this weekend. Yes, it is. My daughter's back playing high school basketball. She signed her soccer letter of intent today, so I'm very excited about that. Scott says, I am dead on concerning OSU on venues. He must know some inside information. He also adds that Wright State, UD, and Columbus Crew are wonderful venues. Yeah, the state soccer was at lower.com field in Columbus. I'm sure that got high marks. Shout out to Pete Edwards and Ortho One. They are, Pete, of course, is co-owner of the Columbus Crew. Very good man. Randy says he appreciates the time and effort we take for high school athletics. We do a great job with class. Thanks very much. It is a privilege to cover high school athletics and the coaches we cover. And I say that, I genuinely mean that. It really is. And Keith's trying to get on our good side. He says we're not old athletes, Sonny. We are former athletes.
Keith, look at these lines. This is an old athlete.
An old athlete. And here's our good friend Debbie. She wants to sign off tonight. She says, awesome show tonight, guys. Truman, go to bed. We got the emojis. We got a dog emoji and a bed emoji. Look at that.
Yeah,
Debbie, that's phenomenal.
That's above and beyond the Call of Duty, Debbie. You've outdone it.
Well, thanks to all of you for watching. A lot of people, big audience tonight. A lot of you will watch on the replay. We love the numbers we're getting on the replay. We really appreciate it. Don't forget our friends at visitcanton.com. That's where you click to find out where you want to eat, where you want to stay, what you want to do when you're not watching high school football state championships at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium. Visit canton.com. Thanks to Brian Bayless for our awesome show open. We'll see all of you guys out at games. Say hello to us. We love hearing from you. We love your comments to the Readers Speaks. And we will be back again next week. We'll announce the show ahead of time. We're not quite sure yet what night it will be, but we will be talking about regional championships and about the state Final Four in all 7 divisions. And with that, Truman, go to bed. Good night, everybody.
You need your sleep.